So there's this family who was stuck in a land that was filled with oppression, that was filled with war. Their loved ones were dying all around them. And there was this, particularly in this family, there was this girl who was desperately wanting to start a new life, starting a new way. But she kept going back to her old associations. She kept falling back, and she kept falling into drugs. She kept falling into things that she didn't want to fall into. She just wanted to get away. This family just desperately wanted to experience freedom. And so this family, probably about 12 people, no more than that, they got together and they were like, you know what, we're going to figure out how we can get out of this land. We're going to figure out how we can get out of this place. And so over the next 3 weeks, they started devising this plan. They started putting this plan together to escape, to get into the country next to them, to experience freedom. And so over the next 3 weeks, they talked to people. They got the resources. They figured out good things and bad things not to do because some people attempted before. It didn't turn out so good for them. And they were just like, you know what, this is what we want to do. And so the day before the plan was supposed to be executed, they're excited, right? I mean, have you ever had one of those moments where you're super excited to get up the next day and you can't sleep? You're just like so jittery, right? Or maybe you're really stressed out because you're about to ask someone out to spring fling or something like that. And you're just like, I don't know if I'm going to go forward with this, right? And you're nervous and you're excited or whatever. And it's what was happening with that. So the next day came and their plan was going to get executed that night at midnight. And so as it got closer to midnight, as it got closer to the time, their family started thinking, you know, I know that this place is filled with war, but war goes away. I know that our leaders over the past 20 years have been very oppressive, but you know what? That's okay. Leadership will change. Our life really isn't that bad here. And they started thinking of like their different friends who tried escaping this country before. And unfortunately, when you get caught, when you try escaping, the only punishment is death in that country. And so they, one by one, they started giving up. And they started dropping out, and they didn't follow through with their goal, except two people, a father and a daughter. The daughter was the one I talked about earlier who just wanted a new association, to get away from the drugs, to get away from life. She just wanted to experience what it was like to just be in a way where she could forget about her past. You know how like when something bad happens, whether you go through a breakup or maybe you go through something traumatic, there's just everything that seems to remind you of that person, reminds you of what took place, and it's really hard to move on unless you just finally, slowly just move forward, right? And so it's everything that she just wanted to get away from. The father, he just experienced death in his life, where his wife passed away 3 months earlier because of a bomb that hit their house while he was at the grocery store. And so they evaluated the risk, and they thought the risk was worth it to try and experience freedom. So as 12 o'clock came, they kissed their family members goodbye, and they started on this long road to hopefully experience freedom. And so after about 3 hours, about a half a mile away from the border, and at this point, they're exhausted, they're tired, their legs hurt, their lungs hurt, they just want to sleep, but they knew if they stopped now, this was going to be their only opportunity to actually escape. And so as they started going faster towards the border, they heard sirens in the background. They started hearing cars coming, they started hearing dogs barking, and they knew that they were caught. They knew that their location was given away. And the only chance that they had was to run faster. So they couldn't go back because they're already trying to escape. They know what they're doing because they know if they get caught, it's done. It's over. So they're trying as fast as they can to get to the line, to get to the border, and so they book it. And as soon as they get closer and closer and closer, they hear the cars coming in closer and closer, and they're surrounded. They're like, this is it. This is what's going to happen. And they just keep running. They close their eyes, and they open up because they hear silence, and they turn around, and they made it. They were out. And the father and the daughter just looked at each other, and you had one of those moments where you know how when you have one of those moments where it's just like finally just a weight just gets lifted off of you and just tears just start falling out. They finally just looked at each other and realized that they're free. And they just started weeping. And I'm not talking about like that cute cry, right? I'm talking about the ugly cry. You know what I mean? Like that ugly cry that some of you guys do when you're just like really crying and you're red, your face is all red and it's swollen and you're just like, okay, I'm good, it's fine, right? And they were just experiencing this overjoy where the father finally gets to be the father that he wants to be to the daughter, and the daughter can finally get this new association in her life. There is nothing more exhilarating in life knowing that the past can be forgotten and that a new life awaits you. People yearn to be free. So we went through this series over the past 3 weeks of Does God Exist? And some of you guys gave your lives over to Jesus for the first time. Some of you guys made some recommitments, and it was awesome. It's probably one of my favorite experiences here so far at College Avenue, just seeing the decisions that were being made. And I was so excited to see that. And yes, exactly. So we go into this new series called How to Follow Jesus. Because that's one of the questions that gets asked me all the time. How do I follow Jesus? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? And so we go to this book of Galatians, and Galatians is the charter of what it looks like to have freedom in Christ. It's the very book that this guy named Paul wrote to the church of Galatia, giving them this idea of what it looks like to leave the past behind and start a new life in Christ. So if you just gave your life to Christ, or maybe you're not used to church, if you don't know who Paul is, Paul wrote the majority of the New Testament, all right? If you don't know what the New Testament is after the Old Testament. If you don't know what the Old Testament is before the New Testament, all right? So the Bible's kind of split into two categories. There's the Old, and then there's the New, all right? So he wrote the majority of the New Testament through letters. And he wrote in these letters like this beautiful description of what it looks like to follow Jesus, what it looks like to have a relationship with Jesus. And so, when Paul was writing this letter to the church of Galatia, he was addressing these people. And so in the first century, the first people to give their lives over to Jesus were Jewish. And so they were Jewish Christians. They were saying, hey, you know what? Jesus was the Messiah. He's my Savior. So they put their lives and trust in him. So what was going on is that they were kind of living like this dual life. It's like this dual expectation. So Paul was a Jewish believer before he was following Christ, and he followed the law. He followed Jewish tradition, right? So he was like the best of the best. And so he understood this dual life that they were trying to live. And if you know anything about the Jewish tradition, you start learning about your faith like as soon as you're out of the room, pretty much, right? So you're going to Hebrew school, you're learning Hebrew, you're learning the Torah. If you don't know what the Torah is, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, right? And they memorize the Torah. You have a tough time memorizing things in school. Could you imagine memorizing 5 books of the Bible? And it's not just 2 pages, all right? Like, it is a whole thing that they were memorizing, and they studied it, and they understood it. And what they were saying is that Jesus' death was not enough. We need to still follow the law. We need to still follow the law in the Jewish faith. And what was tearing the church apart is that in Galatia, the majority of people were Greek. There were people who were not Jewish. And so they were saying, in order for you to be saved, you need to follow Jewish tradition and give your life over to Christ. And so Paul was addressing this false gospel. And so that's where we pick up, which is in Galatians chapter 1, verse 6. And we're going to go through 8. So Galatians chapter 1, verse 6, which says, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. So during this time, like we mentioned before, again, there was this tension going on. There was this tension of like what they had to believe and what they had to follow. And this very message was taking away the truth and saying salvation is not a gift, but a reward through works. He's saying, you know what? It's great that Jesus died and that he rose again on the 3rd day. We believe that. But we believe you can only obtain that gift if you work for it. And so they were perverting the gospel. God has provided only one way of being saved, and that is through Jesus. And so there was this drama going on of saying, hey, you need to believe this. You need to believe this ideology. You need to believe. So there's this radical group that was saying, you need to believe this in order for you to be saved. And so Paul was heading this straight on, saying, you are wrong for preaching this gospel. But there will always be people who try to change the gospel or change salvation. It's trying to take another form of ideology. I love what John Mark Comer said in his book, Live No Lies. Ideology is a form of idolatry. It's a secular, and all secular means, if you know what that means, it's a non-Christian view. So when we say secular, it just means not a Christian view. Attempt to find a metaphysical meaning to life, a way to usher in utopia without God. In other words, we're trying to replace God with our own ideas of what it looks like to be saved. We're trying to replace our own, use our own ideas in order for us to say, hey, this is how we're supposed to really live. The best definition I know of ideology is when you take a part of the truth, which means you take a half-truth. You're like saying this part is truth, but the rest of it is a lie. You're saying you're taking this half-truth and you're making it the whole. In doing so, you imprison your own mind and heart in lives that drive you to anger and anxiety. It promises freedom, but produces the opposite. It does not expand and liberate the soul, but shrinks and enslaves it. What he's saying is that when we come up with our own way, and we try to work and we try to earn our goodness, we try to earn our salvation, and we take our half-truths and we turn them into full truths in our own mind, it does not give us liberty, it does not give us freedom. It actually shrinks our souls and enslaves us. I was listening to a podcast on Monday, and I love listening to smart people, okay? When I get in rooms and I know that I'm the dumbest person around, I'm like, this is fantastic, right? Because I know that I'm going to learn, right? I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow. And so when I listen to things that are going to challenge me, that are going to say, hey, this is what it looks like to follow Jesus. I love what this guy said. He quoted a gentleman named Andy Crouch, which said, idols at first give you everything and ask nothing. Then idols will ask for everything and give you nothing. In other words, there are things in our life that we try to fill our empty void with. We try to fill it with sports, video games, academics. We try to fill it with parties. We try to fill it with dating. We try to fill it with everything that we can think of. You name it. These are all things that we try to fill and give us fulfillment and make us happy. Then they slowly become idols in our lives. What's an idol? We become obsessed with it and we replace God with it. At first, our idols give us everything we want in the beginning, but slowly and slowly, we lose our fulfillment. We lose that zest that we had for life. And since we become so ingrained with that idol, it takes on our identity. And that's who we become. Then we feel this constant pull of what to do or what to give up. You come to a crossroad. And a lot of you guys come to a crossroad. You're like, I don't know what to do. I wish I could go to youth group, but I got this going on. I wish I could follow Jesus more, but I'm distracted with this. I wish I could do this. I wish I could be a better person, but I have this. I have to go to that. I have to be over here, and I don't really want to do this, but I have to because I'm really into it. And you start justifying and making all these excuses of why you do what you do. For example, and I'm only giving this example because this is the world that I was in, okay? It's not anything towards anybody, okay? When we start a sport, it can be life-giving. Right? I mean, when you first start a sport, whether you're little, whether you're in high school, it can honestly be so much fun. You're like, oh, this is awesome. And especially if you're somewhat decent at it, right? You're like, okay, I'm actually good at this. This is exciting, right? And so you're excited. You have a team. You have camaraderie. You have people around you. You're getting in shape, right? You get that workout high. You're just excited for it. You have friendly competition. You have everything. But how quickly does it consume your life? And then all of a sudden you need to join this club, travel over there, work out over here, get this coach, go to this school, do this, put this money over here, you got to go over here, you got to get this up, you got to do this, you got to do that, in order for you to actually be a good athlete. And it's like, might as well go pro, I'm already in it, right? And then if you don't get into the right college because of your sport, you're like, oh, I guess I'm not very good, and you go back and forth, and it consumes your life. And then what happens is it consumes us. We completely work God out of our life. Or maybe you don't work God out of your life, you just start compromising. And you just start making different decisions. We become our sport. We become our grades. We become the person that is always dating everybody. We become whatever we put our effort into emotionally. And it becomes who we are. And I often challenge athletes in this. If your sport went away, would you know who you are? If all of a sudden you got injured and you couldn't play your sport anymore, would you be okay? Who would you be? Same with your academics. If all of a sudden you got into a terrible car accident and you couldn't think the way that you used to think, you couldn't accomplish the things that you could accomplish anymore, and you didn't get into the school that you wanted to get into, would you know who you are? Would you be the person that Christ made you to be, or did you form into the thing that you got involved with? Some of you are in a dating relationship, Is your identity your relationship with that person? And when you break up, is it because it's such a tragic moment because you felt your identity went away because you put so much time and effort and you identified with that relationship? You're like, I'm dating this person, I'm dating this person. Yeah, we've been together for 500 years, right? Which is like 5 days. And then you're just like, I'm so excited, I'm so in love with them. And then when you break up, it's like the world is over because you put your identity into a relationship. And this is what the Jewish people were doing with works. They idolized and were convinced that this idea of works and tradition, it took place of the real gospel of following Jesus. They were relying on themselves rather than relying on Christ to be fulfilled in their life. They were allowing themselves to be controlled by their efforts. What they were doing is distorting the truth. They were turning to the gospel to something else. When Jesus said, "It is finished" on the cross, he meant that your sin was forgiven, that your shame is gone, that everything is done. That when he said, "It is finished," it meant that it was done. He was the perfect sacrifice. But what they were saying is, "Lord, you weren't enough. What you did for me was not enough, so we need to make it up with our works." And I love this other quote that John Mark says, "Every follower of Jesus in every culture has to constantly ask the question, in what ways have I been assimilated into the host culture?" In other words, he's asking, in what ways have you adopted the culture to make yourself look more like the culture than you look like Christ? What lies have you started to believe that the culture has ingrained into you instead of believing the truth of who Jesus is? When I have drifted from identity and have I drifted from identity and inheritance? The temptation for us in the West, us over here, is not necessarily atheism. It's more of a do-it-your-own faith that mixes the ways of Jesus, consumerism, and radical individualism. In other words, are we following the real Jesus? Are we following the real gospel? Are we following who he made us to be? We love this idea of being spiritual. I hear this all the time. I'm spiritual. Okay, what does that even mean? You got your crystals? I don't know. What does it even mean, right? To be spiritual. I'm spiritual. Okay, right? And so, I talked to someone, I was like, what does it even mean when you say spiritual? Because I was genuinely confused. I heard this all the time. I'm like, do you believe in God? They're like, I believe in God. I'm just more spiritual. I was like, okay. And I was like, so what does that mean? They're like, well, I believe that I can earn my own peace. I can earn my own this. I can earn, if I do enough yoga, if I do enough meditation, I can become Zen. Right? And so it's like, you do all these things, but the issue that we come across is when we do it-your-own faith, is that you constantly fail because you constantly make mistakes, and you can never achieve this false idea of utopia on your own. Galatians 6, verse 8 through 10. I love this next part. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. And as we have already said, so now I say it again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. So Paul comes at us with this, well, not at us. He comes at the Jewish people with this harsh attack, right? He's just saying, hey, if this person comes to you with a different gospel, reject it. He was saying, because in the Jewish culture, they believed that an angel was a messenger from God. They believed that if an angel appeared before them, that means there was a message from God that was being delivered to them. And he was saying, even if the mouthpiece of God, this angel said, hey, this is the different gospel, he said, reject it because that angel is not from God, because it would not be preaching a different gospel than the one that we are telling you. He's saying, reject it. That's not what we're about. That is not the true way to salvation. That is not the way that you follow Jesus. And you don't earn it on your own. You earn it because it was given to us. But my favorite is in verse 10. He's addressing something very important. And this is a question I'm going to ask you rhetorically. You can answer this in your own brain. Who are you trying to please? Who are we trying to win the approval of? Who do we so desire to win the approval of? As a pastor, it's sometimes difficult for me to not want to please other people all the time, because I have a heart for people. I want to serve people. I want to love people. I want to meet them where they're at. But sometimes what that does is it kind of gets in the way of me being able to speak the bold truth into their life. Because I'm afraid that it might hurt their feelings. And you're like, Jesse, you're not afraid. No, I really am. Like, it's a real thing. Like, I'm like, what if I say the truth and they get offended and they leave my youth group? And I'm like, I don't care, right? And so it's one of those things that I need to remind myself that I need to speak the truth in your life. Because I promise you that if there's people in your life that are constantly just trying to please you and tell you want to hear what you want to hear, they don't love you. They don't. Because if they truly loved you and they truly wanted you to become the person that Christ made you to be, they would tell you the truth even if they knew it could cost them their friendship. And I need to remind myself all the time of that. So who do you seek approval from? Are you crippled by other people's opinions? Maybe on how we look, how we act, what we get involved with, how we speak? Do we act according to our values or the values of other people? I love what Pastor Chris said a couple Sundays ago. It's not that people don't believe in God. They just like the darkness more than they like the light. But same can be said for approval. It's not that we don't know we shouldn't live for the approval of others. I think you guys know that. I think you know that you shouldn't live for the approval of other people. We have just become so reliant on it to fulfill us, to give us life, that we've confused the command to love with the disease to please. Because it is a command to love people. It is a command to love people and serve other people. But I believe we get that confused on what it is to please other people. One of the first steps in following Jesus is to understand the gospel. Which is what? We live in freedom because of Jesus' death, because of his resurrection. We now have a new life. We can leave the past behind. We can leave the old behind, and we can start new in him. We have salvation. We have hope. We have joy. We have peace. That is the gospel. That is the gospel truth, that he died. He was the perfect sacrifice so that we can be saved from what we really deserved. That is the gospel. That's the gospel truth. We didn't earn it. We can't earn it. We can't do good works. We can't work really hard to earn it. It was given to us. But also, what standards are we living by? There are some of you who are coming to church for the first time. There's some of you who are new to Jesus. There are some of you who gave their lives to Jesus for the first time. And I have over my years of youth ministry experience, I have had so many students who come up to me who don't live in homes where people necessarily follow Jesus. And they come to me and go, they're making fun of me. They're putting me down, they're laughing at me. Or maybe your friends aren't necessarily followers of Jesus at school and they make fun of you. They're like, oh, church boy, or whoa, church girl, whatever. It's like, what, do you love Jesus more than me? Yes, because you're an idiot. Anyways, no, what I'm saying is that we need to be prepared that people will make fun of us, that people will put us down, that people will say things. But you know what? Even if you don't follow Jesus, they're going to do it anyways. I go to your school. They make fun of you because your hair looks different. They make fun of you because you smile weird. They make fun of you because you act weird. They make fun of you because you like somebody. They make fun of you because you do a sport. They make fun of you because you're not good at your sport. They make fun of you because you do this, right? It doesn't matter what you do. People are going to make fun of you anyways. That's just life. It's just you guys are so heightened, like, oh, I'm a Jesus follower, so that means that I'm being oppressed. No, there's just people are being people. We need to understand that people are going to be them. But I can tell you this. If you're going to do anything great in life, you need to understand that people will make fun of you. People will put you down. They will question you. And I know I've told this story, but I know there's new people in here. When I first said I wanted to start following Jesus, it was my junior year of high school, is when I realized that there was a God. I went to my group of friends and I said, you know what, guys, guess what? They're like, what? I was like, I decided I wanted to become a better Christian. You know what they did? They laughed at me. They're like, ha! And what's worse, I didn't go to a public school. I went to a private Christian school, and they're laughing at me, right? I'm just like, what is this? I go to Christian High, and I want to be a better Christian. And they're like, ha, loser. And I'm like, all right, cool. And so, but no matter what, there's going to be opposition in your life. No matter what, when we decide to do something, people will have an opinion. They will judge you, and yes, you could get made fun of. So one of the other ways to follow Jesus is not to worry about what others think about you, and constantly ask ourselves, are we living to please God or living to please those around you? And this can be a question even if you're not necessarily following Christ yet. This can be a question for you in general. Are you living out your purpose, or are you so worried about what other people think about you? Are you living out your goals and your dreams, or are you being captivated by people's opinions? Guys, I can't tell you how many times I have given up on things because of people making fun of me. First off, I had a roller backpack in school. I deserve to be made fun of. Okay, I did. It is what it is, all right? So I don't need your approval for that, all right? I know, okay? But the thing is that, you can make fun of me later for it, all right? I'm good now. But here's the thing. Even in my adult life, I have been so crippled by the opinions of other people. It stopped me from accomplishing amazing things early on in my life. And I just want to get this across to you right now. Let my experiences speak for this so you don't have to go through this. The sooner you realize that people's opinions do nothing for your life, the sooner you'll be able to live the life that Christ called you to. The reason why he said that, am I trying to please people or am I trying to please Christ? If I'm trying to please people, I'm no longer serving Jesus. In other words, he's saying if you're not serving Jesus, you're too busy serving other people. And so, as we start going through the series of what it looks like to follow and practice the way of Jesus, I want you guys to really press into this. I want you to understand what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus, even in the most difficult circumstances. And if you have a rolly backpack, you have hope too. All right? But here's the thing. Is if we want to live that fulfilled life that I know you guys want to live, when is enough? When are you going to stop letting people control you? And when are you going to start truly living the life that Christ called you to live the moment you gave your life over to him? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you so much for your scripture. God, I just pray as we go through this series of Galatians, I pray, Lord, that we just open up our minds and our hearts and our spirits to you so that we can truly know what it looks like to follow you, that we can't earn the salvation, we can't earn perfection, Father, but all we can do is just accept this gift that you have given to us, Father. We just thank you so much for everything you do. In Jesus Christ I pray. Amen. All right, so other than that, I will see most of you on Sunday, if not Wednesday. Love you guys.